and get started tonight to be aware of everyone's time tonight. So again, welcome. Thank you all for joining for our 2021 Pueblo County 4-H virtual livestock session. Our first one tonight is on goats, led by our 4-H leader, Mr. Bill Fisher, and our 4-H member, Morgan Fisher. So they will be leading our session tonight. This is recorded because we will be posting it online for others to see if they weren't able to come tonight. So please just be aware of that when you're asking questions, things like that. Just make sure you're being professional in a 4-H atmosphere, okay? So with all that, we just ask that until you're asked questions or anything like that, please keep yourself muted so that the presenters can hear and make sure that you can hear them. And then they will let you know when to ask questions. You'll get to play a trivia game with them. It's going to be an exciting night. So welcome and thank you. And I will hand it over to our presenters, Mr. Bill and Morgan Fisher, for tonight. And we will go ahead and get started. And I will bring up their presentation.
Beth, we're on now?
Yes, you are on now. Sorry, I was muted. Now it's your show.
All righty, thank you.
Just a minute, sorry.
You're totally fine.
First of all, thank you all so much for coming on the Zoom with us. My name is Bill Fisher and my daughter is Morgan Fisher. We live east of Pueblo, between Vineland and Avondale, and we raise show wethers. If you could go to the next one, please, Beth. The first topic I'll talk about is when we're going to select these show wethers, the most important thing you have is the proper genetics. So genetically, this goat has to be programmed to become a show wether or a meat goat. I think a pretty good example for all of you is that when we compare meat goats to dairy goats, nothing against dairy goats because they're meant to produce milk, as our meat goat is genetically programmed to produce meat. We could not make a dairy goat become a show wether, as we couldn't really make our wether does. They produce enough milk for their babies, but not enough necessarily to be a dairy goat. So we can't genetically make something do something that's not programmed to do. We'll look at these wethers a little bit more with the show wether genetics compared to a meat goat. And you could have a very good meat goat, but he may not have that showy, classy, kind of cocky look that we're looking for. If there's any moms out there, or Beth or Morgan, I know they enjoy the picture of The Rock with the genetics of this muscled up dude. If we could make our show wether look like The Rock, I'd be in business. That's what we're wanting. We want the muscle and all that power. You could go to the next one, Beth. We're looking at these two kids right here. The little 73 goat, we're looking at him as a proper genetic. You're looking at him, he's got a head up. He's tight-heighted. Maybe if that back foot was back a little bit more, he wouldn't be, when I look at him, I see that he's breaking behind his shoulder. I'd like him to be a little more level topped, but you're seeing a pretty good looking goat. When we then go on to look at the goat on the right, you're looking at a really classy, showy dude. As Morgan will talk about on our next slide, is you all look at this goat, you're gonna look at the bone structure of his foot through his forearm, looking at a massive chest and a very wide set to his eyes. And even that picture, you can see that he's already tight-heighted. And that kid right there, he's probably 5 to 7 days old. So I think a pretty good example of some young kids that are looking like they may just make a pretty good show wether. And we could go to the next one.
Okay, so the next thing when you're looking at the goats is you want to make sure that they have a sound foundation. And when you're looking at that foundation, you want to start from the ground up, so from the feet to the top of their head. And a really important thing is that you can tell even from birth is that they have good, strong bones and that their bone is bigger than their muscle. And that ties into when that bone is good and strong, they'll be sound and functional in their feet and legs, where if their muscle outweighs their bone, they won't be able to walk or move properly. And then the next thing is that wide base. This is another thing that you can notice from birth is their width of chest and their expression of their forearm. So as saying, like the eye set carries through the body as with that last goat. So the wide eyes will make the rest of the body wide throughout the loin, the rear end. Whereas if they're narrow, the rest of their body will be narrow too. And so early age, green is okay. You can condition that muscle as they're older. When you're getting these goats, you don't want them to necessarily have the muscle that you want in the show ring the day that you're buying them. You want to be able to finish them more as you raise them through the feed and exercise.
Exactly what Morgan's saying. One of the things that I look at pretty easy is the set of the eyes. So, and this applies to all market animals. I don't know if any of you kids are saying no lambs or steers or anything else, but the set of the eyes will carry through their whole body. So a wide set to the eyes will go to the chest, through the loin and back, all the way carrying out through the back. The kid we have on there now, kind of sadly enough, I'm sure like a lot of projects, he got shut down due to COVID and we weren't able to carry him on. The picture on the right, he could probably be set up a little bit better, but you're looking at a tight hide, a good chest, real up fronted, little Wether. And then as you see in the picture on the left, the kids have that goat pretty well stuck right there as far as being set up. And he just kind of carried himself that way his whole life. So just some things to look at when we talk about saying that grain is okay. Another word for grain is that they're not, they're conditioning. So if a goat, say he's a little leaner when you go to look at him or a little lighter, if he still has the genetics to get fed into being a good show wether, he'll be fine. So no issues there. You just maybe pour a little more feed to him. And we can go to the next one, please, Beth. When we're looking at volume on these goats, a lot of important things come out of volume. Looking at the goat right there is a little goat Cade showed named Morty. He did really good. You'd love to stretch Morty a little more, but you have to love his volume. So as we look at Morty, hopefully, if you kids know the parts of your goat, when we look at Morty's heart girth right there, going around him, you can see he has a super depth of heart girth. So he is very deep, high volume. We're wanting that to carry from his forerib to his last rib. And we love these goats to look cylindrical in their shape. So they're a little cylinder in a tube, but we want a lot of depth. The other really important thing about the volume and the depth is that it'll make them easier to feed and to put condition on. Going back to using people as examples, I think we all know that person who can eat anything and they do not gain weight. Nothing against that person, you know, it's not me. I'm not that guy. And this is kind of a joke. Guys, I can probably look at food and gain weight. Whereas if you know that person out there who he can eat anything, he never gains weight. We do not want that to be our market project for any type of animal because we cannot finish him. So when we see these high volume, big ribbed animals, they're a lot easier to have a successful project with. And we could move on, Beth.
Okay, so moving into muscle shape. When you're looking at that muscle shape, you want good muscle in their forearm, in their rack, in their loin, and in their hip junction. So when you look at the goat, I was showing this goat, he was pretty young at this time because it was out of jackpot, but you can see he has a nice like wide set in his rear end, and you can even start to see some of that muscle in his thigh. Some expression. And you just want good muscle. And the forearm, you'll notice that expression of muscle in the forearm when they're young. That's something that'll stick with them throughout their life. And then you really focus on the rack and the loin. That's mostly where the judge will feel when you're in the show. Depending on your judge, they might feel on that rear end. It just depends on who it is. But mostly that muscle in the rack and loin, you really want to see expression and strong muscle there.
We can go to the next one, Beth. Now here is where we're looking at the difference of a show wether versus a market goat or a meat goat anyway, because as we know, there's pretty much an industry within itself dedicated to making these show wethers. And that's where we're looking at that show ring look, where when I evaluate these goats, I'm with an overall balance and proportion. The wether we have up there, if you look to the picture on the left, you can see his hind end. The picture might be kind of washed out where we're looking for that expression of muscle. You're seeing that on him. You can see a level top. And then of course, Cade has him stuck. He has him in his pocket. and lift it up, but that goat was very tight hided with a ton of muscle through him. The picture on the right, looking at that hindquarter again, you can see that definition and muscle. And maybe one of the things I forgot about when we talked about proper genetics is two things. If there's the parents on there, if this is your kid's first year or second year in goats, and maybe they're not so big, your child, you would want to seek out the appropriate age of that wether, and hopefully that's where your breeder could help you, whether it be any of these animals. You don't want that child to get overpowered. And that could be maybe that late November, early December weather may just be too much for your child to handle. So that's something to think about. And then I know, I think we have persons maybe lined up to talk about the feeding programs, but if you're not genetically there, a lot of your feed dealers, they can really help you and enhance your project. But if your project is just not meant to be there genetically, there's no feeding program or magic, something you could give that little dairy goat to turn into a meat goat. So just knowing that as we go into that. Do you have anything about this, Morgan?
Not really.
Okay. I think we have one more slide.
They just thank you.
Beth, oh, and yep, and this ends our conversation with you all. First, thank you so much, Beth, and everybody who's tuning in. And then I'm always love to talk goats. So there's some contacts up there for me if anyone feels want to talk to us.
Sorry, everyone, I was on mute. So now that you've got to see a bit of their presentation, things like that, if you have questions about anything you saw, you want to talk about some of the pictures that they showed in their presentation, you can unmute and ask your question one at a time, or you can type it in the chat and you can talk with Mr. Bill and Miss Morgan, and they can answer your questions as well.
Hi, I have a question. So I'm from La Plata County. Thank you so much for letting me join. I appreciate it. We are like absolutely brand new to the idea of goats in 4-H. So is there a certain age they should be? I know you mentioned, November, December baby, to show them, like what's the age range to show them, I guess?
The show wethers look the best at 7 to 10 months old. That's when they're kind of at their peak as far as their show ring look and what we're doing with them. Mm-hmm. My question for you would be with your child is how old they are. And that's where I talked with you. Maybe want that 10-month-old wether if you have a little girl or a little boy, where this wether could be weighing in that 90, if he's a heavyweight and your kid's outweighed by the animal, could make a hard day showing, where they don't have a good experience.
Right.
And then sometimes even with your breeder, if they know their doe herd, you will have those smaller does, bigger does, so you could hopefully line that goat up to your child.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Because especially if you're brand new to goats or anything like that, Mr. Bill and Miss Morgan are awesome people to chat with during all this, especially if you're unsure if the goat you have might be good, if you want to know like, what should I be feeding it? How long should I be feeding it? Things like that. Those are some great questions that you could ask during this time before we jump into our game for this evening. Okay, so.
Oh, wait, can I ask one more? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
And you mentioned exercising them. Can you tell me how we do that?
The biggest thing, and then a super question. When we're looking at making these show wethers or lambs, if you look into that, remembering back to our picture of the rock, we're wanting that weightlifter, bodybuilder. We're not wanting a long distance runner. So nothing against our marathon runner, but both of those genetically they're not the same person. The guy that wins the Boston Marathon, and I'm not, ma'am, I'm not being silly with you, just so the kids can see this. If you see that long distance runner, he looks nothing like the Rock.
Right.
So those persons, they're not meant to do the same thing. But as you can look, a lot of stuff on the internet about exercise programs. Some people like sprints. With that said, would we sprint these goats maybe 3 times a week, looking for short bursts? You just want that burst to look like the sprinter, the guy that's running the 100-yard dash. You don't really want to run them any length of time. When these goats start to pant, they're kind of knocked out. But I could talk to you more about the exercise programs. There's a lot of stuff out there. It's what you can do to make your goat successful. There's even, say, an appropriate time when you're getting some fat on them. You want to start an exercise program building muscle, because then you'll just be robbing muscle if your goat isn't of a proper weight and condition to start that exercise program. But there's sprints, treadmills. Some kids I've seen put halters on them and pull weights.
Okay.
You know, there's a bunch of things out there.
Okay, thanks.
And Mr. Bill and Miss Morgan, that same emails that you listed in the PowerPoint, do you mind just throwing those in the chat? That way, if people do have questions at a later time or something like that, they can also get in touch with you through that way as well, if you don't mind. And so their email is in there. If you have additional questions or you think of them later or anything like that, you can easily just email them and they will be happy to answer your questions. So there was another question in the chat asked about like how long do they walk their goats? So I don't know if that was answered with the response you gave earlier. If you want to add on to that, Bill or Morgan, you're more than welcome to.
So Matt, you're wanting to know how, like, are you taking him for a walk wanting to build muscle, or are you wanting to teach him to lead taking him for a walk? I need you to tell me a little bit more about your question, buddy.
And you can either type or you can unmute. It's up to you about how comfortable you feel about being on the Zoom. My guess is he's probably typing, so we'll give him a couple minutes there to type a little bit. So. And while he's typing, we'll just kind of let you all know what we're going to do next. So this will probably be one of the last questions, unless there's another burning question out there. We're going to transition into our trivia game, where what you'll do is you'll get to see the trivia game go, and you'll get to put your answers in the chat. So it will be timed. You'll have to think quick, be on your feet, and it's all about what you just heard in their presentation. So it's just a fun game. It's a really awesome way to do it, and we'll be doing that next. So it looks like he did type it there in the chat. Mr. Fisher, if you want to read that and then respond to that.
Matt, we'll put goats on a walker for about 10 to 15 minutes. A lot of times we'll just walk them after an exercise period to get rid of lactic acid. That's what will shut us down, buddy. I don't know if you're doing sports right now, but that's what always makes you feel sore afterwards. So we will walk those goats, and you will put on muscle just walking, but I'm looking at about 10 to 15 minutes on a walker, and then we'll do a different exercise before we use that walker. We'll walk in between, say, a treadmill or sprints, and that's working good for us. And then I think that's about it.
Okay, that looks like it answered his question. We have time for like one more. If there's like one more burning question out there, we do have time for that.
Somebody's typing, Beth, when you get these goats home and you start to halter break that goat, or you start putting them on a stand, never ever leave your goat tied up. If you have to leave that goat, if mom or dad's calling you to the house to do something, untie, take the halter off him and let him loose. If you have the water left on, if you have anything, never ever leave that goat, lamb, any of these animals tied up without you there. Never leave them on a stand, because you will have a tragic day. Felt I needed to say.
For putting a goat on a treadmill, what would you recommend? Like, how would you put it on there? Would you tie it to the front or like not tie it? Like, I'm just not entirely sure how you would go about doing that.
A lot of people, and you can even YouTube it, and there's people out there showing you how to build a goat box for a treadmill. What a lot of people do is they put 2 halters on that goat, a right side, left side, and then, and not being silly, but then our goat is in the middle and we're both there, you know, we're there, and we start that goat at a very slow speed where he's just going backwards. So he's learning how to go forwards and backwards on that treadmill, and that will build a ton of muscle, but you need to use some caution with that, just because there's a little bit of a risk for injury. And then if you overdo that, you could really break those goats down. But a lot of it is, getting back to your question, have a box and then tie left side, right side, and be right there with your goat.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
I have one more question. Do you walk the goat forward or backwards on a treadmill?
We'll do both. And you'll see a lot of the easy deal is pull up those YouTube videos on those treadmilling, and people do it both ways, kind of depending on what you're wanting for that goat. But you'll see how hard it is even on us to go backwards. And that really builds a ton of muscle. You're building that thigh, rack, loin, and it does wonders on a goat.
All right. Any other questions before we pop over to our trivia? Okay, so with that, we are going to switch over to our trivia for the evening, and I will explain how it's going to work. So just bear with me here as we get that set up. It will be loud at first because the game does have sound, but I will turn the music down and I will turn it a little lower so that it's not blasting your ears off, because I realize it might be really loud on your end. So here we go, and we're going to go ahead and play our trivia game here. So as I said, that I know that music was probably a little loud, and I apologize, but this is our show weather trivia. So the way it's going to work is you're going to see questions that pop up, then you'll get to see different answers, okay? That was based off what you heard in your presentation with Mr. Bill and Miss Morgan. You're going to have about a minute to get your answers in. So what you're going to do is I'm going to read the question out loud. You're going to look at the answers and you're going to type as quick as you can your answer into the chat. And then once you hear the bell ring, I'm going to show what the answer is. And if you get it right, you get a standing ovation. So pretty exciting. Okay. So here we go. Does anyone have any questions before we start? Because I know sometimes that can be a little confusing. And if you need to, you can unmute and ask me questions. You can also type in the chat as well before we get rolling here. Okay, I don't see any questions. So we are going to go ahead and get started. So our very first question of the evening is, what is the most important thing you must have when selecting your show weather? So there are your answers, A, B, or C. So think about it. You can start typing in the chat. And I have some Jeopardy music I'm going to play, because if any of you have seen that show, you will realize that is exactly what they do on that show. They ask questions like that, and they have music playing while everyone has an opportunity to answer. So we're going to give everyone a minute to answer. So make sure you're typing your answers away. Even if you don't know, just give it a guess, because that's the whole point, is so that you can see how well you understood the presentation. So we have our music going. I'm watching the time. I see you all are doing great. And you can either type the full answer, you can just type the letter as some of you are doing. That's fine. So that is awesome. So you have a little bit more time to get your answers in. Make sure you are typing. All right. right, we're closing in on our 1 minute. All right, so that is our time for this question. And the answer is, we're gonna go with the majority vote on this one. Everyone is saying B. Let's see. That is correct. So you all get 100 points. Congratulations. If you all have your camera on, I highly encourage you to clap because you all are killing it. All right, we are going right along. So here is our second question. It is, how do you build the foundation for your show weather? Very important. So here are your 3 choices. We're gonna get our music going. And you are more than welcome to start typing away in the chat. So remember those slides. Even if you don't know, you're more than welcome to just give it a go. Try and think about it. Use what you were learning and your questions you were asking, because y'all were asking some awesome questions. I'll give y'all a little bit more time. Type as quick as you can. All right. So it looks like our 1 minute is up, and it looks like most people have picked B as the answer from the ground up. So let's give it a go. You are all absolutely correct. Another 100 points. Congrats. Round of applause. Round of applause. You all are doing fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. All right. Here is our next question. Is it okay for a weather to be a little green or lighter conditioned when purchased? So this is just a yes or a no question here. Gonna get our music back for you all to enjoy. Remember to type in the chat as quick as you can. You can type yes or no, you can type A or B. Remember, that was on the slide Miss Morgan was talking about, with the pictures on either side, with the goat facing on the rear and then the goat facing the front. So that was the slide we are referring to. Something to think about. Give everyone a little bit more time here. All right, we have about another 30 seconds if you haven't typed in. All right. So the majority of everyone is saying A as yes. Let's see. All right, another round of applause. You all are doing an absolute fantastic job. So of course you do get that wonderful heart emoji because you are all just killing it. What a wonderful time we are all having this evening. So we are moving right along in our game here. And it is, what are the differences between a nice meat goat and a show weather? Remember, those were those 2 pictures as Mr. Bill was talking about with Cade, and he had those 2 different goats and they were talking about that. So there are your answers there. So think about it. I will start our timer here and you can go ahead and start typing in the chat. So try to remember those different pictures, what they talked about. Even if you don't know, if you think you know, but you're kind of stuck between 2, just give it a go, because it's worth trying than not, because that's the whole point, is that you understand so that you can show a really good goat this year. All right, we have another 30 seconds left. Make sure if you haven't typed in, you do get those answers in. All right, you all are doing so well in playing our game here tonight. So our time is up. Most of you said A, our show appeal, our eye appeal, and our tight end. Let's see. Correct. Again, you all get 100 points. Absolutely wonderful. You all are killing it. And of course, we have our wonderful heart emoji to show how wonderful you all are doing this evening. All right, our next question is, why is it good for a Wether to be high volume? Remember, this was early on in the presentation. Those are our 4 answers there. I'm going to start our music and you all can start typing away. So remember, think about this. Think about some of the questions that you all talked about and what Mr. Fisher was talking about with that high volume. And again, I know if this is a question you might be stuck on, just give it a try because you never know, you might get it right. And you will have time after this game. If there was a question you weren't sure about, or maybe it created a question in your mind, you'll have time to ask that after our trivia game. So keep it in mind if there's something that you're like, oh, I don't really know, and I'd like to ask at the end. So we'll have time for that. All right, we have another 30 seconds, so make sure you are getting your answers in. All right. So most of you said B. Why is it good for a Wether to be high volume? Let's see. Unfortunately, that is incorrect. I did see another answer in there that someone had asked for C. So let's see if that one is there. It is C. So unfortunately, it's 75 points, and unfortunately, we're a little off. So we're gonna unfortunately as an but you all still did really good. So remember, it is that easier to feed and condition. And Mr. Bill or Miss Morgan, if you wouldn't mind coming back on and kind of explaining that answer a little bit more, since there was quite a few youth who were a bit confused on that point real quick before we move on.
Where we're looking at is that higher volume animal with that depth of rib, excuse me, and with the chest, is you feed this market animal, and it doesn't matter if it be a lamb, wether, or a steer or pig. These animals will feed easier. They'll have a higher rate of gain. They're going to have a lot more muscle. Kind of everything's going for them. Sometimes you'll hear something maybe called tube gutted, tight ribbed, where when we were looking at the picture of the withers, especially that little Morty goat, where his heart girth, he was so cylindrical and so much depth of rib that they're just a lot easier doing. I spoke about the comparing that person who can eat anything and never gain weight is usually very skinny, very lean, and they're kind of blessed, where there's those people who are bigger, higher volume, they can put on weight a lot easier. So that will help you to get to a proper weight for your county fair, state fair, and then it will let you continue with your conditioning program.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Bill. I appreciate it. So remember, as he said, it's more about the feeding and their condition, not so much their personality like our other answers were based on. So it's okay if you didn't get that, because that's what the whole point of this game is so that you get to learn if there was something that might have been a little confusing. All right, our next question is, so I know this picture is a little small, but if you can see it, it says, what is the correct class placing for this group of market goats? So there are your options, and I'm going to have our music going. But as the music is going, Mr. Bill or Miss Morgan, if you wouldn't mind getting back on and like talking to the youth about what are you looking at again when you look at this group of market goats? What should they be looking at, trying to figure out those placings, if you wouldn't mind? And they're probably working on getting unmuted, so we will give Mr. Bill and Miss Morgan a minute here to get unmuted so they can give you all some helpful insight. They're not going to give you the answer, but if they will help kind of guide you on what you should be looking for when you're looking at pictures like this.
Okay, so when you're looking at these goats, you want to look at from that side view, you want them to have a good, you want to see that depth in them. You want to see some length. And then when you look at that rear end, you want them to be nice and wide, and you want that expression of muscle again. And we'll talk more about it when the answers come in a little bit more.
Okay. So keep all of that in mind. As Ms. Morgan just said, we're going to give you a little bit of extra time on this one because I know it can be hard to see. Maybe you need some time to think about it. And even if you're just going to give it your best guess, just go ahead and do that, because that's the whole point, is to learn. And that way, when you go to a goat show or you're in your own class, you can maybe make a good estimated guess on how the class is going to play out, depending on how the goats look. So we'll give y'all another extra 30 seconds here. So remember, just give it your best, and we'll see what the answer is. All right. So it looks like it was kind of a tie between you all for a couple answers here, looking like D and A. So we are going to go ahead and we're going to give it a go at D at first. And let's see. That was incorrect. So let's see. A lot of you said A. There we go. It was A, that 4-2-1-3. So we'll give those points, and we'll give you a round of applause because I know that was a little bit of. All right, and now Miss Morgan or Mr. Bill, if you wouldn't mind coming back on and kind of just explaining a bit more about why that's the correct placing for this class, and maybe the differences between A and D as far as the placing go.
When I evaluate this class, everybody, 4 is the easy top. So that's makes it very handy. As we evaluate number 4 from the side, and if I should have asked this, if you have the parts of your goat, we draw a straight line from that elbow back to his hock. And on that goat, that's kind of a visual marker with that straight line across. You see there's that depth of rib. You see there's a lot of muscle expression. If you look from the hind end. And this goat, just from our little picture, appears to be very tight-hided. So a lot of good things going on with this goat as far as muscle, volume, depth of rib. Very easy to put that goat number 1. With looking at the number 2 goat, and it gets a little hard, guys, so don't worry about these pictures too much. But in my view, number 2 follows the kind of number 4. So we want to stay with our like kind as far as having that market goat show weather. You're looking at a lot of depth of rib. To fault this goat, I sure would like to stretch him out, make him a little longer, and more muscle in the rear end, also like Morgan's saying. Then when we get to the pictures of 1 and 3, my evaluation, I would have 1 at the bottom. And that's just the way I'm seeing them just off the picture. And that's neither here nor there, guys, because we're wanting to talk about how these goats look. As we look at 1 though and 3, both these goats are similar in their kind, and they're our bottom half of the class. As we draw our line from that hock, or from that elbow to the hock, you're seeing that the ribs are above. They really don't have the depth of their heart girth, of their ribs, and even with their tail set and their hip. As we look back on these goats, we sure would like to level their top on both goats, and we would want a lot more muscle in that thigh and that hind quarter.
Perfect. Well, thank you for that. So thank you all for playing our game. We have one more question, I believe, for this evening, and then we are going to do just like a couple more things, and then we will wrap up. So the question is, pick which celebrity is referenced as a physical reference for picking a good show weather. So remember that what we talked about, his picture was on that first couple slides. We're going to have our music going here. And maybe you don't know his actual name, but maybe his nickname that Mr. Bill talked about quite a bit. You are more than welcome to type that in the chat as well, even though it's not listed here as an answer. We'll give everyone like another 30 seconds because it looks like you all are very much aware what is the correct answer, or at least you think you do. So y'all are just chugging right along with this tonight. All right. So it looks like everyone is believing it is B, Dwayne Johnson, also known as The Rock, and you all are absolutely fantastically correct. So big round of applause. Absolutely fantastic. So you all did a fantastic job. You all won a total of 650 points. Big round of for that. Thank you so much for playing our game. I'm going to stop sharing here so that you all can see each other again and everything like that. We appreciate you all playing our game. So really quick, the very last thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you all, you should have all received your little passport deal. It's either a Word document or a PDF, and that way you know what the answer is for your passport deal, because I know that might be something that you're unsure about or something that you see and you're like, oh, I don't remember the question. I want to be able to get my goodie bag. So let me pull that up for you, and I'm going to show you both what it looks like on both the Word document and the PDF. That way, if you're using either one, you know where it goes. So here is the Word document. So our first question here for our session tonight is this one. It says, a good market goat has the characteristics of which celebrity? So in this little box, you would put either, and I need to spell it right, of course, which I probably didn't, but that's okay. So you can put Dwayne Johnson, or you can put The Rock. Either answer is correct. And remember, you only need to answer 2 of the questions from our 4 sessions in order to get your goodie bag. And then of course, at the very bottom here, if you click this link on Friday, it will take you to the trivia game where you'll get to play it by yourself. It'll walk you through, it'll have questions from all of our sessions throughout the week. And then what you'll do is on Friday by 5 p.m., you'll go through, you'll answer all of these as best you can. If you play the trivia game, you'll put your score here, and then you'll just email it back to me. Okay, so that's all you do. I'm going to put my email in the chat in case you need it. So that's that, and I will show you what it looks like on the PDF document, because I know some of you might be needing to use that instead of the Word document. So what that one looks like, and I will share my screen here so you all can see that one, is this is what the PDF document looks like. So you'll do the exact same thing. So here in this little box, you should be able to type in it. So you would simply type The Rock or Dwayne Johnson, whatever is easiest for you to type. So same thing here. Once you go to the other sessions, you'll type in your answers for each session. And then again, here's your trivia link. If you click on that on Friday, it'll take you to that game and you'll be able to write your score in that box as well. So remember, either one of those you can use. It doesn't matter which one you use can use either one. And if you fill it out all the way, get it sent back to me, you'll get a 4-H goodie bag. And if you don't live in Pueblo, it's okay. It'll be mailed to you instead. So that'll be something to do. If you don't have it, because maybe some of you did not get that email, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my email in the chat. If you need it, just type a Y. That way I know that you need those documents, and I will work with you on getting your email, okay? So I'm going to put my email in here really quick. And of course, my name is Miss Beth. I work here in Pueblo County for 4-H. So there's my email in there. And that's the one you would send your passports to if you want a goodie bag. And let me tell you, there's going to be some cool stuff in there. We have some cool squishy pigs. Okay. We have some squishy cows. There's going to be some cool 4-H stuff in there. So you definitely want to try and get a goodie bag for sure. So, with that, we're just going to do a really quick survey. It's really, really easy. Okay. All you have to do is raise your hand. That's how easy it is. And then of course, if you have any extra questions for Mr. Bill or Miss Morgan, you're more than welcome to ask them at that time. So really quick, if you liked tonight's session, all you have to do is raise your hand. That's all you have to do. So if you liked it, you can raise your hand if your camera's on. If your camera's not on, you can just simply hit the thumbs up button, the wave button on your screen there. Either one is fine. Perfect. Awesome. Thank you all so much for that. All right. All right. Thank you all. Perfect. All right. So now we're going to move on, and I know it takes a while for some of those hands to go down once you click on it. So the next question is on our little survey. It's only 3 questions, nice and short. If you felt that the presentation helped you feel more comfortable with your project for this year, go ahead and either raise your hand, give me a thumbs up. And of course, if your camera's on, you can just do it. You can just hit that little button there on your screen. Perfect. Awesome. Thank you. Give everyone an opportunity to do that.
We're not doing the goat project, but it was good information.
No worries. That's perfectly fine. All right. Thank you so much for doing that. And then I will once I make my notes here, we will ask our last question. And then of course, if you have any questions that maybe came to your mind as you were playing the game, once we ask my last question here, you'll be able to unmute or type in the chat and ask Mr. Bill or Miss Morgan your question if you still have one. So our last question is, are you planning on attending our other sessions this week? And that is our beef, our poultry, and our rabbit. So if you are, and it's okay if you're not, just give me you can raise your hand, you can give me a thumbs up, either one works, and we can, and that's the very last thing we will do. All right. Awesome. Well, thank you also. Okay, that's all we really have for this evening. If you have questions, if you have additional questions that you want to ask Mr. Bill or Miss Morgan, you can unmute, you can type them in the chat. We'll get them answered. Otherwise, you're free to go. If you need those passport documents, please type your email in the chat. That way I know to send it to you if you don't have it, okay? So, and if you don't know your email, you can ask mom and dad really quick. You can go grab them if you need to. And that's totally fine. So either way works. And otherwise, we thank you for joining us. Mr. Bill and Miss Morgan, do you have any final words before a couple people sign off unless they have questions?
Oh, Beth, there's just a question in the chat. They're wanting to know about what does a tight hide mean? And what a tight hide is on a goat is the Boer goats, the original Boer goats that came over, they have a lot of, I would say in their front end, a lot of leather, maybe similar to like say a Brahman cow, if you've seen them, maybe is a pretty good example. The reason they were built that way in South Africa is it let them lose a lot of heat. So it makes that Boer goat very heat tolerant where they came from. We then brought those goats to America and realizing with making them showy, either right or wrong, that loose hide and all that leather is not as pretty as a goat who we would say is very clean fronted, would be my example of that. I bet you could get on the internet, even like the pictures, like we had that one little goat who's a pretty classy, but where that skin, you're not seeing wrinkles in the front end, would be a way to describe that tight-hided, or what's not tight-hided, if that helps you.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
My only other question,
I
I
have
should
a
have put
question
it on there. Who knows what GOAT stands for?
Oh, don't even start with this.
Kind of Tom
Greatest
Brady.
of
Who
all
knows?
time.
You, I love that answer. Thank you so much.
Why are you so-
And there was one more question, Mr. Bill, that someone was asking right there. It kind of got cut off. So if you were asking a question, go ahead.
So I have a really good doe at home. I didn't know if I would keep her as a breeder or a market. She's like super beefy, so I don't know if I should keep her as a market or show her as a breeder.
Buddy, your question. Tell me your question again.
So I have a beefy doe, but I was going to show her as a doe for breeding, but I don't know if I should keep her as a market doe because she's super beefy.
You can show her as a breeding doe and keep her.
I'm wanting to say, at your county fair, you could show her as that breeding doe and still keep her. Is your concern that you would say show her in your county fair, she makes the sale and you lose your little doe because you have to sell her?
No, I'm just wondering if I should, she's like super beefy, so I'm wondering if I should keep her as like a market, but like I wouldn't sell her, but I would keep her as a market just to place higher in the class because she is bigger than some of my Wethers.
I mean, because it depends on her age. 'Cause if she-
But I don't know if there would be a concern with, if you're not going to sell her, if you're not worried about losing her in your sale, like qualifying, you could show her, you might even be able to show her both ways. That would probably be a question for either your superintendent or your agent, where you could enter her in the breeding does, and then you can roll her right back and then put her in the market classes. Is that,
Okay, thank
that's
you.
right, Beth, but I'm not positive.
Yeah.
But
What county are you from?
Larimer County.
Okay. So if you work with your 4-H agent in your county, they'll be able to help you. And if you don't know who that is, you can ask your club leader and they'll be able to get you connected with them, and they should be able to help you with that, so you know what to look for when you're going for county fair.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions or anything like that? And if not, of course, we appreciate you all getting on here tonight and having a great time and joining us. And you're free to go unless Mr. Bill or Miss Morgan, you'd like to throw anything else out there for them.
For Kyle, sorry. So on that doe, is she like, how old is she? Is she a doeling or is she older?
She was born in December.
Okay, yeah, so
she
you,
could go both ways,
yeah, she could go both
I
ways
think.
usually. So that's what we did a couple years ago, is we showed some market does. Depending on your county, on the rules on that sale, if you'll have to sell her or not, you'd have to look into that. But since she's younger, you can show her with those market Wethers, since she'll be the same age as them, probably.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I was muted there. Sorry, everybody. Of course, is there anything else? Any other questions? Of course, they did put their email in the chat. So if you come across questions later on or something like that, you can always email Mr. Morgan and sorry, I had that wrong. Mrs. Morgan and Mr. Bill. I apologize about that. So of course, this session is recorded. So if you need to go back and watch this, you certainly can. It'll be available on the Pueblo County 4-H YouTube. And I will be sending out links. If you registered and everything like that, you'll be getting the links for the videos. So thanks for joining. I hope you join the rest of our sessions the rest of the week, and make sure that if you need that passport, make sure you type your email in the chat and I will email that over to you, and you'll be all set to go for our Friday fun day. So thanks everyone. You can log off and Have an awesome night. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.